This month has been flippin' insane for Kickstarter highlights. There are so many games to get through and so little time. Welcome to episode 5 of Revamped. For everyone new to the podcast, hi, welcome to Revamped. My name is Tim Chuon. I do photography and filmmaking and videography on YouTube. But most importantly, when I learn, you will too. So thank you for tuning in for the podcast. And there's been so much rich and delicious and amazing news about board games lately. Hence why we are talking about the highlights for July. So let's get into it. Now, so we'll start first with the games that you've recommended to me across Instagram. If you're not following me on Instagram already, at Tim Chuon, TimChuon as in Nancy. So I post polls on there where I get your votes and your answers to what games I should look at this month. First, let's talk about Mantis Falls, recommended to me by Friday Night Games Official. Okay, so the artwork for Mantis Falls instantly reminds me of Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. Now it has a very old school noir feel to it. It's very simple, but what did catch my interest was actually their slogan. Like life, a cooperative game that's only really cooperative sometimes. And I really felt that. I felt like that phrase really resonated with the epitome of what adulthood is. And for whatever reason, it really caught my attention. So I love the slogan to begin with. And then the game also mentions that it is a social deduction game for 2 to 3 players. Now let me stop right then and there, because normally social deduction games are really big groups of people, right? But this game, Mantis Falls, is made specifically for a small group of people, which is unheard of. So it seems really simple. A majority of the components are cards, but here's how the game works. It takes place in the 1940s, hence why you have the noir theme. And get this, you are a witness to something that was not supposed to be seen. Bam! Instant hook. Now, side note, I think it would be really fun to tell scary stories when Halloween comes around, but anywho, in each game you may have only witnesses, so everyone has to survive together, or there could be an assassin hidden amongst your group. So right there is the classic social deduction premise, but here's where the game starts to differentiate itself in the progressive elements. As you're walking out of the town trying to stay alive, you're faced with a bunch of different events. Like the ones shown here, you have someone who's seen you, I think, and you get wounds if you don't defeat them. But then if you do, you get to heal your own wounds. So as you are progressing through the game, you start to gain allies that give you like different benefits, like draw power. And then you can also gain tools that end up helping you. But you can also, at the same time, start to encounter grave affliction. So these will in turn damage you. It affects your life wounds. And here's where I feel like it's so captivating and interesting. It's the way the cards read. For example, under the betrayal card that they are showing here, it says, sometimes, keyword here, let me say it again, sometimes heal 3 wounds. If you are on a road in the dark, heal 3 wounds for yourself and keep betrayal as an affliction. Affliction, then the affliction itself reads, play until death. The game is not over until 1 or more players are dead. Afflictions are not removed by anything. So the story elements are there. It's very thematic, and the consequences just sound very severe. And it sounds like the decisions that you're making are so impactful. I think that's why this game is so interesting to everybody. Now, overall, the game looks very different. I like how they put a twist on the norm of social deduction games. I like how there's a lot of new, unique mechanics added, like the tools and the people you meet, and even the events that kind of keep teasing the level of trust that you have as you are progressing throughout the game. I think though it would be very interesting to see this game, even though it's tailored for a very small group of people. I want to see it kind of expand and just see how it plays out with a bigger group of people, to at least have those options for you to explore in an expansion. But I don't know if that goes against the core theme and play style of the game itself. But either way, mechanics are very unique. They're very interesting. And I love how they put a twist on a classic mechanic. My favorite part for sure is how the cards read. They sound very different from how other cards read because of the amount of impact, the amount of tension they're introducing, and the amount of story that they're all condensing all within one description of a card. So I really like those elements of Mantis Falls. So thank you for the recommendation. Now the next one recommended to me is Shadow Kingdoms of Valencia by Great Lakes Strut. So this one is a 1 to 5 player engine builder where you draft troop dice in order to complete different battle plans. It looks like you're hiring different champions in order to build up or fire up your engine, and then start dropping some combos and using different abilities depending on your character, or what they call it actually is the Warden. Now the screen printed meeples look pretty cool. It's between a gargoyle, an orc, a goblin, a skeleton, and a gnoll. Now let me start off by saying that a Kickstarter campaign page really should read like a rulebook. Thinking about it now, I actually want to dedicate an entire video to that about how a Kickstarter campaign page should look. I felt like it would follow up well after the what a rulebook should look like. And the reason I say that is because the last thing you want is for a backer to struggle through your campaign page. Now, with that said, Daily Magic Games did a fantastic job with their campaign page, which is why that idea came up to begin with, because it's so nicely organized. Why? Because their campaign page, this is how it's structured. First off, they go, boom, this is Valeria, here's where we're coming from. Secondly, here's a plan for what we have for Kickstarter. And then they go into, here's exactly what the game's about, here's what you do on your turn, and then they balance it nicely with artwork and a list of components. It's perfect. So props to you for Daily Magic Games for really setting the standard for campaign pages. I really like how streamlined and how nice of a read it is. I love being able to jump into a brand new game and understanding what it's about, what you do in your turn, and what it looks like, and what it has to offer right away. So on your turn for Shadow Kingdoms of Valeria, you're moving your warden to a brand new location, which is 1 out of 5 different shrines on the board. And then you take these troop dice that is on a shrine, and then you add it onto your player board. Now, the reason why that's important is because the dice will give you troop strength, it will give you a type, and it will also give you a discount that helps you with different shrine actions that you're performing. And then in turn, each shrine from either magic or champion or gold and so on will give you different resources, from purchasing warriors to currency that you can spend. So after you visit these shrines, it looks like you can then use your troops to battle, and then battle is then conducted, from what I'm gleaning at least from the campaign page, by comparing the strength of your troops to the influence points on your resource track. And then you gain victory points by participating in that battle. So I do like how battle is the primary way for you to gain upgrades. It really makes you feel like you are in an MMORPG because you're gaining experience in the exact same way. I like how turns are simple because you go to different shrines, gain dice, and then there are a lot of directions you can go in terms of where you progress, because you can recruit more minions, you can unlock more battle plan slots, or you can just gain a ton of influence and then focus on generating resources. So there are a lot of options for you to proceed in different directions. And it's always fun in a game when you're given a ton of directions to choose from and you kind of don't know where to go. So the components are pretty cool. They have screen printed meeples. I like the look of their dice, and their artwork, particularly on cards, is so well done. I love the color contrast they use, especially for the Death Knights and the Witch Doctor. Those look so good. So again, thank you to Great Lakes Strut for recommending me this game. It is also on my watch list as well. It looks great. The only thing I would question here is the battle mechanic. I would probably have to read a little bit more about it, because I'm wondering, is there a little bit more depth to it than just as long as you meet a certain number of strength, then you automatically will defeat whoever you're fighting against. So that is one mechanic I'm more interested in. I'm always more interested in different battle mechanics because that's my favorite aspect of any board game, is just PvP, confrontation, fighting in general. So overall, I'm just wondering if there's any kind of dynamicism to battle, or is it just as long as you maintain this number of strength, then you can defeat anyone below that? That's one question I pose to this particular game. Now, there were also 2 to 3 other games that were recommended to me, but they've already ended already, and actually one ended about a couple months ago. But we are focusing just on what's happening right now as of July 15th, 2020. So the last board game recommended to me was Perseverance by Sword and Board Games. This one was already on my watch list. I am a huge fan of Mind Clash games, and here's why. Ever since I took pictures and did a video on Cerebria, I've been a huge fan of Mind Clash games, mostly because they're so rich in theme and story. And I love that. Of course, as a photographer, videographer, I'm going to be very, very into that, which I'm sure many of you are as well. Story is just such a big part of board gaming. So for Perseverance, here's what the game's about. You were on a cruise line that just got shipwrecked on an island. And this island is fully inhabited by dinosaurs. So your goal is to survive on this island by establishing a settlement and then defending it from dinosaurs, because in reality, you are in it for the long haul. And then over time, your city is going to adapt. And as you live in, quote, a debatable harmony with the dinosaurs, hence the name Perseverance. I love it so much when titles are in sync and in harmony with the theme of the game, and it just clicks like that. So apparently the game comes in 2 standalone games, which they're calling episodes 1 and 2. It's pretty cool how they can be played separately or even combined to play what they're calling a chronicle mode. I actually like how there's no legacy elements in there. Now, if you don't know what legacy elements are, they're basically core elements of the game where they carry on from each session as you play the game. So it permanently changes the game as you're playing it. For me, I'm not the biggest fan of legacy elements because I feel like once you finish the game, then that's it. So I like how this still incorporates replayability. Now, earlier I mentioned that I really liked Man Clash games because they are so rich in theme. And let me give you a specific example. Remember how I mentioned that your goal is to survive on an island for an extended period of time and develop a settlement? Well, your character in this game will evolve with you, and they will physically and characteristically change. So not only do their minis change, but their abilities change as well. And I think that's so cool. Like, how does that not blow your mind instantly? When's the last time you heard of a game where your character that you play as ages? Right? Isn't that crazy? It's so cool. And honestly, like, that mechanic alone already has me hooked onto the game. So components in the base game, you have standees, and in the deluxe, you have all those upgraded to minis. I'll be dead honest with you, I'm not the biggest fan of standees. It's just, like, I know people hark on miniatures, and for good reason, because they're expensive, and sometimes they are overly produced in terms of how it relates to the gameplay. But there's just something about standees that they just hurt my soul. Like, ever since I played Pokemon Monopoly and a lot of old school games back in the 90s, if there was ever a standee, I just wasn't a fan. I don't know. I can't help it. So I am for sure leaning towards the deluxe, but that price point though is just making me hesitate. It does come with a modular tray system. It has dinosaur minis, it has squishy berries, it has metal tracker tokens, a dice tray and an art book, plus a giant box to store everything, just to mention a few of the components. So I think you do get a lot, but that price point is pretty high for me. Now, don't get me wrong, I think it still looks like a fantastic game, but if I do end up backing it, I probably won't be able to back anything else because I gotta set those limitations per month here. Okay, I want to talk about 2 more games in particular today. The next one's ending in about a week, actually less than a week as of the time of this recording. But that game is called the Age of Atlantis by Eldorado Games. Now, I backed the first game, which was Eldorado. I have yet to make a full-on set of videos and photos for those, but I did take pictures and videos of like an unboxing back in the day when I was still experimenting around with what B-roll and board games, the original name for what this channel was back in the day. Reason why I backed Eldorado to begin with is because I feel like as a board game company, they're so unique and different. They're like the Apple and Razer of board game companies because their look and overall feel is so aesthetically clean. It's very minimal. It's very simple, right? So you just have a black box with gold letters of Eldorado. Like, if you look at the Age of Atlantis right away, honestly, I feel like you can recognize that this is an Eldorado game. So I really like it when publishers are able to distinguish themselves and maintain that constant kind of just graphic design theme going from game to game. But of course, since this is more mythological and based on kind of like the whole Greek theme, you're going to have way more vibrant artwork since you're working with all these creatures and gods. And you can tell by the fonts that they use and even the text boxes though, that this is still their key design. Okay, so let's talk about the Age of Atlantis in terms of the game itself. It is a competitive engine building civ game. You are the leader of a noble house and you must prove to Poseidon that your house is none other than the best. Your goal is to grow your population, to discover a bunch of new tech and cultures, and then lastly, defend the city, all while appeasing Poseidon and preventing the flood. I will say this, I am a sucker for Greek themes, so as soon as you put a Greek theme board game, I'm already hooked, naturally. If this wasn't already apparent by my year-long coverage of Lords of Hellas, then I don't know what else would be. But in terms of gameplay, I like how they've added depth to worker placement, because when you use workers, their morale is decreased via a specific die that gets turned around. How cool is that, right? I think that is such a unique mechanic because we never really think about how workers feel, right? A lot of the times in board games, we're just allocating them in different areas and resources. But I think it's really cool how Eldorado addressed that and say, you know, what if these workers actually have I don't know if diminishing return is the proper phrase here, but what if they have kind of like a feedback system where the more you use them, then the less happy that they are, and then the worse they perform. Now, you're also building a city in this game, and what's really cool is that the buildings themselves, like the physical structure of them, you see when games make an in-between of miniatures and meeples, they work so well, and that's what's done very, very well in this game. Because a lot of the times when buildings are like meeples, they're so standardized and kind of generic that you kind of forget about that component. So they don't really resonate with the game. And honestly, I feel like it has a big impact on the game itself. If you don't remember what the components look like, and if they don't like feel great, then it's going to affect your gameplay for sure. But at the same time, many people aren't happy when there are too many miniatures because again, it may be like overproduced and the price point may be like too high, or they're kind of just worried that the game looks too good and it doesn't play as well. And those are very valid reasons, and I totally understand that, which is why it's nice because here in the Age of Atlantis, you have kind of like a happy medium. It's not as overproduced as a miniature, but at the same time, it's not as generic as a full-on meeple. All that to say that I appreciate the structure of buildings that they've gone for in terms of aesthetics. However, the actual miniatures in this game are full-on giant machines that have slots on their back, and you can use them not only to carry the resources around, but you can also use them to attack your opponents, which I think is super cool. They're highly detailed miniatures. So overall, from what I'm seeing here in terms of overall gameplay and how the minis are integrated and like the dice they carry and an extremely detailed main board, a giant sculpture of Poseidon. Honestly, what's not to like about this game? You have very cool components. You have a very cool theme. You have a fun and unique set of board game mechanics. Overall, this game looks fantastic. I did lightly skim the rulebook just now, and it's only about 2 pages of actual how to play. So I'm pretty sold on Age of Atlantis. It's always nice when the rulebook is shorter than expected. And that's not to say that it takes away from the gameplay, but it just makes learning something that you look forward to because, again, who wants to read a 50-page encyclopedia versus a 2 to 3 page rulebook and then just get started playing the game? So that was the Age of Atlantis and the last game. I actually say the last game for the one I personally anticipated the most. And right after that, I'll end the podcast by telling you which games I'm backing for sure. So the next and final game I want to tell you about is the Shivers. Now, I actually saw this game from a preview from Girls Game Shelf. They made a fantastic video about it. It was so fun to watch. And like I said, it is my most anticipated game for the month of July. I love the whole concept. I love the whole look. I love just everything about this game so far. Let me tell you about it. Now, the Shivers is a, get this, 3D pop-up haunted house adventure game. If I can drop this mic and not hurt my soul, I totally would right now. Like, do I need to keep going? You combine a pop-up with board games and you make it about solving clues and investigating all these different hints and putting all these puzzle pieces together. And it's all just so cool. Every session of the game is called an episode. It takes about an hour to play, 2 to 5 players. And they also have these tiles, which are actually like little pop-up books that interlock with a magnet system. I love the artwork. It is a perfect balance between not too cartoony to underplay the whole haunted house theme, but it really uses the colors in foreground and emotions overall to just integrate really well with the theme. Now here is where the Shivers really stands out. So each pop-up room is 3D, exactly like a pop-up book, from the chair to the piano to the fireplace to the furniture overall. And they all have distinct scenarios like the cluttered kitchen, they have the private library, and the mysterious laboratory, and a bunch of others. The die is pretty cool because, get this, it's not numbered, and it doesn't have any kind of symbols on it, but rather it has very distinct phrases like, it works, or it doesn't work, or it kind of works, or it backfires. It also looks like the game comes with a magnifying glass, it comes with different episode guides, dry erase marker. The deluxe copy has the same thing, but there are more story cards, an expansion called the Eerie Crypt, and then more of these same components and some character dashboards. So you play the game with a storyteller who opens up the pop-up rooms, and then players will end up picking a character standee, and then you explore all these rooms, finding details like opening a drawer to find different hints, collecting different items, and also encountering different inhabitants of the house. And all of these tiles, again, they interlock magnetically. So my overall thoughts, there are 2 things that I want to mention. Now first, I honestly, and I think this is completely irrational, but like I mentioned earlier, you already know how I feel about standees. So I personally would have preferred the deluxe edition to offer miniatures. Do I dare say this? Yeah, I'll say it. I even wouldn't have minded if they cut back on everything else just to really make the characters actual miniatures. Again, honestly, I premised this by saying it was irrational, but for this game, I would be totally okay with standees. Like I said, I just think it would be a little nice. Secondly, I am wondering, since there are so many moving parts, I'm wondering how sturdy the magnetic tiles are interlocking with each other, especially since if it's cardboard and it's magnet, so I'm not sure how sturdy it really is. And my biggest concern, an actual important concern that is not just about physical appearance of the game. So I know that they said that the game comes with 8 adventures. Now, does that mean that the story ends and it's dead once it reaches 8? Like once you finish all 8, is that it? Which in turn leads me to ask, if you are an experienced player and you're introducing it to someone for the first time, how does that experience go? Do you have to play a scenario that you haven't played before? Like, would you already know all the clues and hints that were given to you already? And that in turn leads to my third question, well, how is replayability in this game? And I know that they mentioned that there's a storyteller involved as well. and some people already addressed it in the comments, but some were asking if there was an app that can be the storyteller for us, so we have the options to participate, because I would imagine that the storyteller is sitting out for the game like they would for Mysterium or games like that. But those are just some questions that came up as I am scanning through the campaign for the Shivers. Now, let's finish off episode 5 by talking about which games I will be backing. 100%, hands down, no doubt, the Shivers. It's just completely different and unlike anything that I've seen before. I love the artwork. I love how different the gameplay is. I like how it's a very unique take, kind of like these clue-driven games. Now, normally I do back competitive games, but this makes it feel like you're in an escape room together, which I think is very immersive and very cool. I'm already interested in seeing what the clues are and to see how you can progress throughout the story, especially with all the fine little details that they've included in the game and in the different scenarios. If those pan out well, I'm very excited about it, especially since I love shows like Sherlock and House. I would love to back the Age of Atlantis as well, but that solely depends on my own personal funds and whether I can shell out 2 games this month. And same for Perseverance. I would love to back that as well, but the only problem is if I were to get Perseverance, then that would be at the same price point as 2 other games. So overall, July is a very, very difficult month in terms of which games to back, because there's so many good ones and there are a ton of others that I'm sure I haven't even mentioned yet. But overall, those are my thoughts scanning across 4 or 5 different games across Kickstarter in July 2020. Feel free to share your thoughts down in the comments below. I would love to hear what you guys are backing and why. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel and my podcast if you aren't already. Until then, I will see you all next Wednesday.